Okay, this is The Grass is Greener on WXRW 104.1 FM in Milwaukee. I am the host of the program, Gary Grass. With me is my co-host, Babette Gruneau.
Hi, and today we have with us Rachel Eidebuff from the Jewish Voice for Peace, and she's also a professor at UWM. She was a advisor to one of the student groups involved in the peaceful university encampment this spring. So welcome, Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Just for correction's sake, I am now the faculty advisor, although SDS has been suspended. So I guess I'm the faculty advisor in exile for Students for a Democratic Society. And I also am the faculty advisor of the proud new Diaspora and Jewish organization, which is a non and anti-Zionist student org, which is brand new.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. We've been seeing over the course of the years this shift. Years ago, I remember. We were sharing an office with the General Union of Palestinian Students back at the university like a million years ago, and I guess I was outspoken enough that I got frequently called a self-hating Jew, which was very shocking to me because I didn't feel like
much.
Yeah, I know. It's like I might hate myself, but it's not because I'm Jewish. I'm not Jewish. I've never been Jewish. But that's good. I still have to be a self-hating Jew, apparently. So yeah.
You're not Jewish, and they called you a self-hating Jew?
Yeah.
Wow.
They. I don't know. I guess it's a mark of pride that I was fit that category for them. I don't know. It's weird. But yeah, no. I guess for one reason or another they assumed I was Jewish, and I don't know. They just did. But yeah, no. I don't think it takes a lot, and but I think they're in some ways they're on the run, right? Because years ago there was a lot more. I really felt unwilling to say anything. And there was this perception that the Jewish community was really tight around supporting Israel, and there was very little dissent. And in more recent years, it's like it seems like there's more and more people that have broken with Israel. I mean, even before October 7th, you started to see like this younger generation come up that was much more willing to criticize and much more willing to take their own position and not be sort of dictated to by AIPAC and not like follow marching orders. And that was really nice to see. And I think, since October 7th, it's like all hell is broken loose. And now you have these really horrendous scenes of like Jews being rounded up in Europe for anti-Semitism and jailed. And it's just gobsmacking.
Yeah. Just a pretty major historical correction there, Gary. American Zionism has represented itself for a very long time, certainly since 1967, if not before, as the Jewish voice. That has never, ever been true. They have gained traction by claiming to speak for all of us. So, for example, Jewish Voice for Peace does an invitation every Tuesday at 4 p.m., so your listeners are welcome to come anytime, to the Milwaukee Jewish Federation on Prospect, to come into alignment with Jewish values and stop supporting genocide. There have always been anti-Zionist Jews in this country and in the diaspora. And the only reason that most Jews and non-Jews think that it's always been Zionism is because of repression, falsification, and denial of the actual very diverse and contested history. Martin Buber, for example, the famous German Jewish theologian, knew that there should be one state, a democratic state in historic Palestine, that Jews could live there, but they couldn't take it away. There were always anti-Zionist Jews. Some of them, not all of them, were involved in other left politics. There are religious denominations within Judaism that feel that having the kingdom of God on earth, represented by Israel, is an abomination religiously. So it's definitely true that things are moving, and most Jews under 40 don't see Israel as part of their Jewish identity, despite the best efforts of the Federation and some of their Jewish elders. But we have always been here. We have just been obscured and lied about.
Right. And I mean, I know that when, if you go back like before my time, right, when Zionism was just sort of coming into the mainstream, I mean, it was this really fringe thing at the start. I mean, even among, American Jews and Jews in the diaspora generally, it was this kind of weirdo kind of cult. And but I think it was very, very successful in presenting itself as the voice. I mean, I think part of that was enforced by like, if you go against the grain and do it too publicly, you're going to end up losing your position. You're going to get Norman Finkelstein, you're going to have stuff happen to you and you're going to be excluded from the mainstream and you're going to be treated like you're the freak now.
Well,
Um,
and what's really important in that, Gary, is that, and Joe Biden said this in the 80s sometime, that if there hadn't been Israel for us to give $3 billion a year to represent our interests in the Middle East, us being the United States, the empire, we would have had to invent something like that. That Israel and support of Israel has always served US empire. And so there's been sort of a forcible
that's ironic because it was started to serve British Empire, but okay.
well, and also it's worth saying that the reason that the Western powers supported the creation of Israel in 1948, Truman knew he couldn't take very many Jewish refugees, that anti-Semitism was too intense in this country. None of the European countries, Western European countries, wanted Jews there. So you could say that Zionism is reliant on and deeply entwined with anti-Semitism, right
So
from the get-go.
it's based on or it benefited from European anti-Semitism.
Yes, exactly. And so the notion that, Jews, German Jews could return to Western Germany if they wanted to, or be taken in by England or France or the United States, this was never, they knew that that would not work because of anti-Semitism. And so it's kind of like a twofer for the, racial capitalism and empire. It's like, oh, now we have this country that we sort of like, marionette around to serve our interests. And we don't have to have Jews live here. Right. That's not actually really great for Jews. But the other piece of it is, I think, that in this country, American Jews who were already here and who managed to come after the Holocaust, we, like a lot of migrants, have tremendous amounts of post-historical trauma, right? And so the question of Jewish safety is it's very intense for us. The question of collective security and safety. And in a funny way, the existence of the state of Israel meant that Jews here could tell themselves that they were safe. I call this Jewish Disneyland. Like we could always go to Disneyland. We could always go there and it would be the magical kingdom and we'd be safe, so we can be safe here. And if you take traumatized people, and there are many populations in our country that have historical trauma because of the violence of racial capitalism, the violence of migration, the violence of slavery and indigenous displacement. And you say, like, oh, don't worry. Like Biden said numerous times after October 7th, we have to support Israel or American Jews won't be safe. That is anti-Semitic. I'm like, I've never been. Like, so you're telling me I have to go there to be safe? You're the president, right? You should be on my safety here.
Yeah.
But that's an anti-Semitic thing to say. Oh, sorry, Jews, but you're gonna have to be safe in another country because we're not really gonna like work on white supremacy. We're not gonna like talk back to the Proud Boys, et cetera, et cetera. Instead, we're gonna like, low key let those people do what they need to do. And if they happen to like shoot into your temples, like, we're sorry, but there's always Israel.
Yeah, and there's so many like really kind of bizarre ironies to this. I mean, Israel has been in a large extent like this garrison state where they have news stories about people like going to school in little mini tanks because they're afraid of terrorism, and they've really stoked fear, as part of their whole strategy to like justify their existence. And there have also been like leaked documents showing that they like intentionally promote anti-Semitic groups in order to like ruin countries for Jews outside of Israel and try to force immigration to Israel. I mean, it's just there's so much that's very peculiar about that whole thing. And I mean, Lenny Brenner had a book many years ago, Zionism in the Age of the Dictators, right? Where they talked about how, like this major sort of seminal generation of early Zionists, really embraced the idea that one land for one people. And the reason why there's anti-Semitism in Europe is because we really don't belong here. We belong with our
Mhm.
own people in our own place. And it's like, as long as we're where we don't belong, it will always create anti-Semitism. And so we have to get out and go back to Palestine, where everyone will love us and we can just live with ourselves and be safe.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And where Israel has rescued Jews, from
In
other
Africa
places.
and such.
Yes, that it
right.
has
And
been
Lashes, right.
a very mixed favor because Israel is predominantly culturally, the dominant culture there is Ashkenazic, is Eastern European, and those, you know, not white Jews are regarded as lesser than. So there was an Israeli Black Panthers back in the 70s, and it was Jews of color saying, we deserve, so like the notion that Israel is going to rescue Jews is really, it's again, it's kind of a Disneyland. Like it's a fantasy because there is an equality in Israel, even among Jews, let alone between Jews and non-Jews, particularly Palestinians and Israeli Arabs, as they're called, which means Palestinians who live in Israel.
That's always struck me as very strange that they aren't allowed to say that they're Palestinian.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally grew up with this notion that the Arabs were trying to be mean to us, the Arabs. So, like, even the word Palestinian was not allowed. And I think that that's very much the education you get, you know, definitely the Jewish education. And this is really well explained by the film Israelism, if you haven't seen it. But, I think non-Jews also have that explanation, like, oh, Israel is surrounded by Arabs who don't like them. They're this like,
Oh,
they're the only democracy in the Middle East, and the Arabs, and this is really Orientalist, right? It's like the Arabs aren't capable of the same kind of civilization. The Arabs, and like, it doesn't dignify Palestinians as people with a history. I was
yeah.
just talking to a friend of mine this morning who just finished Rashid Khalidi's book, The Hundred Years' War on Palestine. We were talking about how, as American Jews, we didn't learn anything about Palestinian people, anything, except that there were Arabs who were bad and wanted to hurt us. Nothing about Palestinian history and culture. And like Jews and Palestinians lived cheek to jowl in those lands for hundreds of years. They shared recipes, they shared families, they
Yeah.
shared things. And like all of that history has been denied us.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned recipes because I mean I was just looking at this like old like Zionist cookbook from like the 1930s, right? How to cook in Palestine, and it's like all these is Palestinian dishes that they refer to as Israeli cooking,
Yeah,
right? And you ask what is Israeli cuisine? Israeli cuisine is like, well, we invented falafel and hummus and
no,
shakshuka, and
totally.
it's I don't know. I mean, it just there's just all these sorts of things that come up because it's like this is such a rich topic. I mean, yeah, I mean, you don't want to take the focus off of the Palestinians in Gaza and everything that's happening to now, but there's also this whole aspect of how bad Israel has been for Jews in the diaspora in so
Mhm.
many ways, and how it is like really created this horrible anti-Semitic environment. So right now you have this kind of idea, right? On the one hand, you've got these expansive definitions of anti-Semitism, right? That have been like deliberately kind of jury rigged and ginned up to say, oh well, anything that is a criticism of Israel could be a manifestation of anti-Semitism, and therefore we're going to treat it as anti-Semitic, right?
Right.
And so there's all this like phony anti-Semitism that's going on. This is anti-Semitic. This is anti-Semitic. Oh, you don't like seeing kids burned alive in tents? You're anti-Semitic, right? It's crazy. And on the other hand, you do have I see on Twitter, I see these people that are like kind of wheedling their way into the kind of left anti-Zionist kind of stream that's going on where people are just opposing Israel because Israel is bad, and they're like bringing up stuff like this horrible thing that's in the Talmud, and it's like these are all like fabrications from August Rolling that aren't in any of the real Talmuds, right? They're in a completely fabricated document, right? So you see this like this old school anti-Semitism sort of I mean it never was really gone, but it's like kind of finding a new like bed to like try to flourish in now.
No, I think you're totally right, Gary. And it's complicated, right? Because anti-Zionism is not the same thing as anti-Semitism. So, as a proud Jew, I will say that I think Israel does not represent me at all, and I don't support the state. And so, we have to do so much work to oppose the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Association's definition, which conflates the two. Anytime you criticize Israel, you're being anti-Semitic. But as you point out, anti-Semitism is real, and it's
Yeah,
mostly on the right. Like, I find it maddening that, as Congress, passes all these, pro-IHRA bills, and,
yeah,
that they're not thinking about the central source, like the people who do murder people at prayer are white supremacists who hate Jews because of the Great Replacement theory, right? They think that
right.
Jews and African Americans and immigrants are trying to replace Western European Protestants. Those are the people who
The
yeah,
people
that
who
are
were marching with the
Tiki torches.
tiki torches, yeah, saying Jews will not replace us.
I know I actually had to do a deep dive to be like, who I don't really want to be marching with a tiki torch. What are you talking about? But that is an old idea
Right.
that we are like the Pied Pipers of
Yeah.
whatever group, right? Which is a
The
horrible
Jews are coming to replace us with blacks, right? That's
blacks and immigrants
they,
because of
they don't say that, but that's what it is, right? And
right.
people who hear that expression don't even know what it means or what it's about. Um, but yeah, I mean, the guy who wrote that IHRA definition, right? It's if you look at it on the face of the definition, there's like the only thing wrong with it is that it has like an inherent capacity to be misinterpreted, right? But what it says is never actually wrong. It's like that, saying you're anti-Zionist has been classically an expression of anti-Semites for years and years and years. That's the
Well,
one way that they sort of hide among, more legitimate people, right? So it can be code. It has been code for this group for ages.
but I
Um,
think now that there's, as you pointed out in the introduction, there's such a wonderful fluorescence of anti-Zionist Judaism. I think it's intentionally duplicitous that way because sure, like Zion is and can be anti-Semitic slang for Jew. And I think back to your point of a little while ago, there is anti-Semitism on the left too. I would say far less than, like, there are no leftists who have shot up temples or like that comes from the white supremacist right almost without exception. But that doesn't mean there aren't people who think like it's that Israel is a racist state, and as you point out, like it comes out of some like weird Jewish characteristic that we're like that, and that we like hoard money and all the like old, the really old craven ideas about
yeah, right.
Jews as moneylenders and as creepy and not fully human are there. And even the idea that this is something that I think we struggle with in the Palestine solidarity community, that I think it's important to say that Israeli loss of life on October 7th, 2023 was not okay. That in no way justifies what Israel has made out of it and the disgusting distortion of Holocaust memory to say never again while committing a Holocaust. So it's complicated because I'm not in favor of what happened, what Hamas did on October 7th. I think that's wrong and bad. And I think, the Jewish loss of life, though complicated, right? Because A, much smaller numbers, B, we now pretty much know that there were deaths by friendly fire from the IDF. We also know that, and it infuriated me to listen to Kamala Harris repeat the mass rape statistics about October 7th, which have been widely discredited by careful journalists. And even the Times issued a very, very ambivalent retraction because of their horrible coverage of that. But it's complicated, even with that, even though Hasbara, Israeli propaganda, went wild with that, so that somebody running for president of the US is running around embarrassing herself by reporting a bunch of manufactured lies. But most people believe those. When I talk to liberal friends and I say, that didn't really happen that way. There were not mass rapes by Hamas on October 7th. There was violence, yes. There was, nothing about that
Yeah,
day is
yeah,
good, but that is a lie.
yeah.
But it is hard, I think, when people want to justify that as part, like I do understand where Hamas got to, given the strangulation of Gaza. I do understand that it's a desperate act of resistance. At the same time, I don't think we need to excuse it either.
Okay, let me go back to one of the thoughts I had earlier, right? Because when you were talking about kind of the erasure of the Palestinian identity, the perspective that you're surrounded in a sea of Arabs, right? Which I remember that trope being very, very strong a generation ago.
Mhm.
One of the examples that came to mind was Stephen King, kind of who likes to butt his nose into things he knows nothing about, and just sort of say, "Oh yeah, we, people of different religions have been killing each other over there for thousands of years." And it's like,
Right.
and it's like, oh, what a dumb, dumb trope that is, right? I mean, and as you pointed out, like almost immediately afterwards, it's like, you had Jewish people living in Palestine for generations, just absolutely fine with Palestinian neighbors, and they all got along just great. And this whole effort to like sectarianize everything is like another aspect of all of this. And you saw that with the Republican struggle in Ireland too, where like there was like a big propaganda effort to make it all about Catholics versus Protestants, and there was that aspect to it. I'm not saying
Right.
that it
Right.
wasn't there, but the idea that you're trying to completely suppress the Republican aspect of it is like, no, we're opposed to British imperialism in our country is what we're really opposed. That's what we're trying to liberate ourselves
Right.
against.
Right.
It is not we hate people for being a different religion. Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, you've got these, kind of you have all over the world. You've got these Jewish diaspora communities that are, doing just fine. I mean, it's like the community in Shanghai, which is like just it's like this sort of cherished community that they're very proud of. They've got Jewish communities in Russia that they're very proud of, that they're very happy to have. And traditionally in Islam, I mean, Jews were people of the book. They were part of the Ummah, and they were allowed to do whatever they wanted to do, and they were just fine. You got a big Jewish community in Iran that's doing just fine, right? This idea that there's like no safe place in the world for Jews, and you have to go to Israel when Israel is in chaos and people are fleeing Israel by the thousands. It just seems like, again, one of these like strange propaganda things that doesn't really add up in reality.
Well, and also it pushes Jews who, arguably since after World War II, it's more complicated than that, but we'll just say that for a date, Jews get to be considered to be white people, right? So I think if we felt more clearly and understood more clearly that we better figure out how to be safe here in the US, those of us who are here, I think we might be rushing a little less quickly to identify with the powers that be and to recognize that our safety is with other people who have to fight against the effects of white supremacy, patriarchy, settler colonialism, etc. But I think it encourages this notion of Zionism, like our only safe place is Israel. We're going to support Israel. We're going to give money to Israel. Like I grew up in a, liberal Zionist community, and we collected money at Halloween for the Jewish National Fund, which I now realize went to plant trees in over the sites of Palestinian villages destroyed in the Nakba, right? But we thought that was that, like you encourage your kids to do that, plant a tree in Israel, hope for Israel, believe in Israel. It's our people's hope. Well, we also Jews had the highest percentage for any ethnic or racial group of membership in the Communist Party in the 30s and 40s. And if you think about the Communist Party as the party that's fighting racism, that's fighting for workers' rights, like, I don't know, maybe that's the better bet, like, yes, repression under McCarthyism, et cetera, but like making common cause with the people around you who are dealing with repression, possibly a better investment than a place you've never ever been. I've never ever been to Israel. I have no intention of going. And I do not feel like that's where my safety is. I feel like my safety is here in Milwaukee, and it is best produced by my making common cause with other people who are fighting against white supremacy, etc. And we want to have a safer, happier, better place. Like the elision of Palestine in our education and the emphasis on Israel as the only democracy in the region. Like if you think about the war on so-called wokeness right now, and so we're like, I'm supposed to teach American history without mentioning slavery. Like, are you kidding me?
That just doesn't make sense.
Like
I mean,
it's like,
it's so much a part of the U.S. and its history.
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. There's no infrastructure then, so I don't know what there is to talk about. Like if you're going to take slavery out of the equation, then we don't really have any buildings in the country for like hundreds of years. So I don't really know how we're gonna, you know.
Yeah, just they magically appear. Don't worry about who made them or who grew the cotton. But the one of the things that's like I think has really broken down. We were talking about how things have changed. Um, you know, I think it was easy to have a dream of this sort of faraway place that you never saw, right?
Hmm.
And now um, it's like it's not a place that you've never saw. Now it's a place that like is like constantly assaulting you with TikTok videos of Israeli soldiers wearing the clothing of Palestinian women they've killed or evicted from their homes, right? It's like it's all this bizarre stuff here, just gleefully celebrating, torture and murder and oh look at what we're doing, and it's like, it's not like you have to like dream of this far off place that you maybe will go visit. It's like right in front of your face, and they've got machine translation now that like instantly translates all the Hebrew where they've been saying the quiet part aloud for generations, and we just never heard it.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And my Jewish education and my parents like didn't take us to Israel. And they because they were afraid of of our security. They rightly thought that Israel was a dangerous place because it was constantly at war. They didn't take us to Israel, but they still encouraged, and both of them being liberal Zionists, and they really are appalled by Netanyahu, they're appalled by the religious right, et cetera, et cetera. But on some level, and I really think this is about historical trauma, the notion that this was safety.
Yeah.
Because I taught religious school here in a liberal Zionist congregation for a while before I was fired, for talking about the Nakba. But we never talked about,
Congratulations.
thank you. Yes, I wear it as a badge of pride now. But we never talked about pogroms. We never talked about Eastern European history. We never talked about the reason we came here.
Seriously?
Yeah, no, never ever. We didn't learn Yiddish. We didn't learn Yiddishkeit. We didn't read Isaac Bashevis Singer. We didn't do any like we didn't talk about Sephardi Mizrahi history. I mean, I could go on at length about all the stuff we never talked about because it was all about A, learning enough Torah to get through your bar bat mitzvah, and B, Israel. So, I always felt like, well, we're like really giving our kids short shrift. Here we have this beautiful, complicated, rich tradition that also contains a lot of suffering and tragedy that they inherit without knowing it, and we're not talking about it. They don't know about Kishinev. They don't know about mass. They only know about the Holocaust and Israel. It's as if Jewish history started in, 1939. And like there's a sentimentality about boobies and zadies, grandmas and grandpas, but there's no talking about them as historical actors. Like, oh, my great grandparents were with the working men's circle and the Bund. They were socialists, but like we weren't talked to, and many people, many Ashkenazi Jewish relatives and ancestors were union leaders and were socialists, and not because we're so principled, because we kind of saw the writing on the wall and we're like, oh, we're going to need help in this country, but we never, ever, ever, ever talked about that stuff.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, no, it's a great sort of thread of history that's sort of seeded through all sorts of important stuff. And it's like, to like lose all that is just incredible.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
no,
it serves something. It,
yeah,
it is a lot of historical loss, but it serves this idea there is only Israel for you. There's not this beautiful other history that would bring you into close relationship with all kinds of people.
yeah. You always have this safe place you go, that we can go to. Oh, can we go there now? No, no, it's far too dangerous.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to move on to a slightly different topic, and that is some of the legislation that there is now, both in the Congress and some of the things that are going on in the universities to kind of tamp down on any solidarity actions, on any encampments, on what can be said, etc.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
well, let's talk about free speech and civil rights for a little while. That's a good topic, particularly when it comes to the university, because like you're well situated to talk about all of that.
yeah, I'm blown away by what I see coming down the pike. Um, UWM alone spent $50,000 this summer on private consultants to help them manage the fallout, so-called, from the encampment
Oh my
and
gosh.
to
Fifty
stop
thousand
every.
dollars
Yep,
for
yep.
advice. They could have
For
asked
advice.
the community.
They could have asked, like this. I have many feelings about this. So, but yeah, I mean, they have like, you could say a whole professoriate full of people who might have wanted to talk about these questions and who are expert in a variety of fields that might have been useful to them. But no, they spend external money and our taxpayer money, the money that our students, UWM students, they take on so much debt, they work so hard. You could just reduce their tuition by whatever, 50. Anyway, but what we're seeing is this national, and like I have to say, shout out to the UWM administration. There was no violence on campus against our students. And we know that, and it's important to say, even to the audience that will be listening to you, that all of the violence that happened in encampments was police and vigilante violence against student protesters, that the encampments were spaces of engagement and discussion and solidarity and love. And that's, what I saw at UWM.
But
And
don't you realize how dangerous that is?
well, I think you're right, Gary. Like I was at the encampment a lot, and I was like, I when they took it down and when they reached an agreement with the UWM administration and took it down, I missed it, and I realized it was because that's why I became a professor, because of spaces where there was free exchange of ideas and students taking on the project of being responsible for ideas, not to mention sanitation, supply chain, shelter, all the things they did to make the encampment. That's why I became a professor, because I wanted to be part of that. It doesn't happen in the same way. It happens in moments in the neoliberal university. Our students are so stressed about debt and what's going to happen to them afterwards that it's hard for that to happen. And so here I was in this space of the encampment where people were like talking about things and relating to each other, and it was spring and it was really beautiful. And like, I do think that's a huge threat. I think that they know that no encamped student was ever violent to anyone, but that the free flow of ideas, the kind of solidarity, the two Shabbat services that Jewish Voice for Peace and Chavurat Zipporah held at the encampments, which were
They were beautiful.
Muslim and Christian and Jewish. And, people kept coming up to say, non-Jews kept coming up to say, I've never been to a Shabbat before. This is so nice. I think that's very scary to some people. To us, it's like, oh, hey, this is great. It's so beautiful. It's hard for me to talk about it without crying. But I think some people are really scared because we knew at the encampment who our friends were, and we knew who our enemies were. And I think that that's very threatening.
I mean, it's important to know who your friends are and who your enemies are.
Yeah.
I have to say, I mean, I have a little story about one of the encampments up in Madison. I happen to have a close friend who I actually represented on a free speech case against the university at one point, who has a family member that's on staff at UW-Madison. And, the administration was trying to deputize like their janitors and their like groundskeepers and all their like university staff to like to act on behalf of like ejecting the encampment, and like the crew that my friend's relative led, they just refused. They said, no, that's not our job. You want the university police to do that. That's your call, but we're not going to do that. Leave us out of this. And it's just incredible the way how this becomes so totalizing for the university. I mean, when we had a free speech case against them, they came back. The state of Wisconsin wrote this brief that said, well, false speech isn't protected by the First Amendment, and it's like, false speech isn't protected by the First Amendment?
Gary,
You get to declare what's true, and anything you don't like is not protected?
Gary, what case was this? Was this one of the pro-Palestine student cases?
No, actually, this was regarding the refusal to recognize the student government elections in 2013, and the students who protested that, right, who tried to organize their own alternative group, right, were slammed. A couple of these students were threatened with, they threatened this punishment, right, which is reasonable conditions on continuation, right? Which basically means you are in a condition worse than suspension or expulsion until you do what they want you to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, you can't, if you were expelled, you could go off to another school, you could get your records, you could do that, right? You'd have an expulsion that you'd have to explain. But if you are in this condition, they won't release your transcripts while this is pending. So they just hold you forever, and you can't go to another school. You can't even try to explain that you've been expelled, right? Because it hasn't happened. And it's like their condition on these people was, to to issue a statement saying that they were wrong and the university was right and that they didn't have a right to have their own opinion. It's literally what they were supposed to say, right? And one of my clients was like, well, I can't say that really because I'm a Muslim and I'm not supposed to lie.
I
Um,
believe that some of the students uh, who were involved in the encampments this spring are also facing some really harsh um, retribution on campus.
Yeah, I don't know what they got for their $50,000 this summer, but they have definitely been harassing these students. I know these students, they're people who do what they're supposed to do and take the lessons that they're learning in school and try to apply them to the world they see around them. Clearly not something that the administration likes to see. So yeah, students are being all the stuff that Gary was talking about, like suddenly they can't access their transcripts or register for classes. There's a lot of that kind of thing going on. UWM this summer sent UWM police to the houses of three of the student activists, arresting one of them at 3 in the morning, not telling him why, letting him go after he
Knock on
sat.
your door in the middle of the night. It's like this is the
Yeah,
classic sign of the police state, right?
right, exactly. And you know, the administration, they now invoke procedure, which is the last refuge of the fascist damned, you asked me. Oh, because like the system, UW
Well,
system too was
I invoke procedure against them all the time because they have all these rules that they don't follow. Like
yeah.
if students want to challenge them, like I have never seen a case where they have tried to discipline a student where they actually followed their rules. I've just never seen one, right?
No, they keep like some of what they've been doing in these cases is really sketchy. Like, well, it was supposed to be a public hearing, but it's on Zoom and no one got the link. And it's like it's supposed to be a public hearing. It's really different if it's a private hearing. Like
Right,
there's
right.
some really sketchy things, and they're just pursuing harassment and war against these students. They're pursuing revenge instead of, I mean, it seems to me reasonable that a university that purports to be concerned with equity and safety for all its students might not want to call their library after a known perpetrator of Nakba when when we have many Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim students at UWM who feel, and I've heard this for years, unsafe going to Golda Meir Library. It's a small, low bar ask. Like, oh, change it to whatever, the UWM library. There's lots and lots of ideas. The students call it Electa Kinney after a famous indigenous educator here. Call it whatever you want to, but listen to the students. But they have doubled down on that. And
Well,
then
yeah,
they,
I mean, some of these kinds of things where you kind of protect people against things that are like harmful in that way, right? There's ways to do that are like just flat out restricting people's free speech, right? Which
Mhm,
they do without a second thought. And then
mhm.
when it comes to something like this, where they don't have to restrict anyone's free speech, all they have to do is speak themselves a little more politely, right? They refuse to do it. So
Yeah,
there's this incredible hypocrisy in that.
no, totally agree. And what we're seeing is happening at a massive scale nationally and globally. This notion that the way to, there's so the Hasbara, the Israeli propaganda is, Israel is under siege, Jews are under siege, you have to help us by, clamping down on so-called terrorists, which is you and me and the three of us and all of our students and everyone. So there's that. But it's somewhat disingenuous to say that this war against people criticizing the genocide, people criticizing Israel is in favor of Jews because the people who, like the Christian Zionists are really, really in favor of the state of Israel because they think that, come the rapture, Jews, we're basically apocalypse fodder, right? We're supposed to be over there holding it down until Jesus comes back and then we like go up in flames and all the Christians go to heaven. Like this is not a pro-Jewish position. This is using us.
Yeah,
And
kind of a
it blew
scary
my
thought.
mind. Sorry, go ahead.
Kind of a scary thought. I
It's really
mean,
scary. Yeah, and it's like last year I think it was October, maybe later October, early November when there was that big pro-Israel protest in DC, and there were all these mainstream Jewish organizations, and John Hagee who has said that Hitler served Jesus by annihilating 6 million Jews. Like what? That's who we're hanging out with now? That's who is going to make us safe? What?
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Oh, that's appalling.
yeah, it's just crazy the bedfellows that this has created, and but it's a long term thing. I mean, all these things have been if you look back, you can see the roots of all these things. I mean, like I say, I mean that legal case stemmed out of something in 2013, and prior to that, you've had. I mean, I talked to the university about when they had their like posting policy because like I don't know if they still have it, but they went through a period of like you had to go through and get like a actual imprimatur in order to like post something. It had to go through their censorship board first. And it's
Mhm.
like, what? Yeah, it's like, oh, we just thought that would be a good thing to do to, to keep, the right messages out there. And it's like, they don't, half the people that work, for the administration don't give a thought to free speech at all.
Yeah.
Um, and when you see these, you talk about this consultant group and all the emails that go out to the professors, reminding them of their responsibilities and so forth, and it's like, no, that is what you're saying. What they say in those emails is not legally correct, and it's not constitutional, and it's like the way they try to restrict people's speech is just egregious. I
No,
mean,
I don't even understand. Like, I'm harangued by email, and I'm on sabbatical this semester, but I still get the emails that I'm supposed to adhere to viewpoint neutrality, which, like, I'm a historian. Like, what does that mean?
you
I
know,
don't even know what that means. Like, viewpoint neutrality, like, I'm not supposed to have an analysis of the past, or, I'm an immigration historian. We're about to encounter this, we're promised a period of fairly horrifying events for our foreign-born friends and relatives and neighbors. Like, I'm supposed to just. I don't even know what that means, and I'm constantly being
I,
harassed. And they're talking about it not only, and this violates,
yeah.
decades of protocol by AUP for my extramural utterances. So if I'm like talking to you now, or if I'm talking to somebody's church, I'm supposed to be viewpoint neutral. Like what?
Like all of your speech, you go home and you talk to your family, but you're supposed to be viewpoint neutral because you're employed by the university. Where this comes from is, they extract a segregated fee from students. They put some of that fee into creating a public forum for speakers to come and for student groups to buy literature and stuff like that. And because you are compelled to pay for it, it is compelled speech for some people that pay into that would rather not. And so, in order to like justify that this isn't compelled speech, it's the creation of a public forum in which they observe viewpoint neutrality, right? So there's no one who's favored in getting the money, so they have to be viewpoint neutral in distributing the money. It doesn't mean that everyone on campus
Hmm.
has to muzzle themselves and not have a viewpoint. I
Oh,
mean,
that's really helpful. Thank you
they
for that, Gary.
they've taken this idea. I mean, they are masterful at taking ideas that make sense in one context and applying them where they have utterly perverse effects.
No,
When
these are just people who would be getting D's in my class. Like, okay, you got the idea, but you applied it wrong. Let's go back to the drawing board. They're not very thoughtful. But what I think is true about administrators on this campus and probably at least in the US, they're very scared.
Mhm.
I do know that the administration at UWM gets many calls every day from um,
Well, you had all those elite university presidents resign.
I know, and my thing is like, could you at least just act like an intellectual first? Like give a rousing defense of what you did. But no, they were
Yeah,
like
they did
bunnies.
not uh, support with strongly the need for students to be able to speak out or faculty to be able to speak out. They really were kind of hemming and hawing on the stuff and really not coming out strongly for free speech. And yet they felt they had to resign.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and like their job, I would have liked to hear them just justify their own actions. Like it's embarrassing that these intelligent women who have made it to the top of their fields as university professor, presidents in the Ivy League couldn't, but I think that they were advised by consultants like the ones UWM hired
Yeah.
to like, just not make any waves, not try to, and like so what's her name? Is it Stepanik, who's now going to be a Trump appointee? Like she got to
Oh,
be like the
Stefanik.
queen of the
Yeah.
day. And instead of having these intelligent women say, listen, here's the story, here's what it is, let me explain it to you. They didn't represent us very well. It makes academics in general look terrible, I
Right.
think.
Right. I mean, you're supposed to have a constitution in this country, right? And then you're supposed to have the university, which is supposed to be this, you know, uh, citadel of extra free speech. It's like, no, we're not giving you the very minimum the Constitution allows. We're going to give you everything to the full extent that it doesn't break some other law because we want to have, this, fearless sifting and winnowing, right? We're supposed to have this vigorous marketplace of ideas where every thought comes out no matter how absurd, and nothing's wrong when you're brainstorming, and it's like, let's have it all come out and we can debate it and we crush the bad ideas and the good ones will continue forward because that's how we progress and how we thrive is through this robust interchange. And instead it's like, oh, you can't say that. You can't say that the current student government is illegitimate. You'll hurt their feelings. I mean, that
Yeah.
was literally an argument that they brought into court.
Yeah.
That's their conception of free speech.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it's terrible, and I mean, it isn't even the new presidential administration yet. And what we're seeing, and this goes back to the initial question about repression, that the House Bill 9495 that passed a couple weeks ago,
yeah,
that
yeah.
basically says they can and like I study McCarthyism. I know what this is, right? Like they can just look at you and say, well, obviously you're a terrorist. Like that is terrifying. They can jail you, they can like disband your organization, and
I trim my
you
beard short though, so I'm not a terrorist.
no, but like once they have that, that is so much power. And they will get it because our well, we'll see, right? Gwen Moore did change her vote on that. Maybe, but I think they'll bring it up in the new session in 2025, and then they'll have that. And like, I one of my books is about the American Committee for the Protection of the Foreign Born, who are immigrant rights advocates, and many of them were communist aligned, and many of them were not. And I spent a day in the archives reading the letters from people former donors, many of them academics and members, saying, I can't be associated with you anymore, so forget about my $25 a year. It was really one of the most depressing days I've spent in the archives. And basically, it was like, what's going to happen now? Which is like, if they just start to say SJP is a terrorist org, right? That the way that impacts everything that SJP can do, the way that the kids that will be afraid to join it because of the possible of their futures, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
It's always the ripple effect, right? It's
yeah,
it's not the
absolutely.
immediate thing. It's always like there's always. I was mentioning this last week. That there's always these layers of overcompliance, right? It's not that you go after this place and say you can't say this. It's like you know you put some restriction on them and what they can say, but but you go after the people that are behind the ones that do the processing of the transactions for the ones that are funding whatever, and it's 4 or 5 steps down, and like every step along the way wants to overcomply a little bit more just to have that extra cushion that they're not the ones that get nailed. And so
Right.
by the time you get back to the people that are actually the focus of the law, right, or the indirect target of the law, they are overcomplying by a factor of 10. And just the fear of being involved with any of this stuff, just there's always that extra cushion at every level. And we just need to encourage all those cushions to get really, really thin, right? I mean, we want to, all of this represents a form of like, concession in advance to the attack, and it's like you can't be constantly retreating, and that's what for-profit organizations are always going to do, right? They're always going to protect their bottom line by retreating, and it's like someone needs to have some guts, and it's not going to be the corporations.
Yeah, it's really scary, and we've seen it in American life before. And people worry about things like losing their jobs. Realistically, we know that
Yeah,
most people in this country live a couple of paychecks away from bankruptcy, because of the inability of our government to like control housing and food and other costs, and the incredible profits by the wealthy, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So people are terrified because
yeah,
capitalism is a brutal system to live under, and so they rightly are like, well, I can't lose my job, so I can't seem like a terrorist. Like,
right.
one of the
It's
lesser known
it's
documents.
not the one hero that loses his job that you need to be concerned about. You need to be concerned about that, but it's the 1,000 people that see him lose his job
Yep.
and then decide that they're not going to press things. Yeah,
No, and they're creating like the same folks who put out Project 2025 also put out this Esther project, which is about the perils of the anti-Zionist left, so SJP,
yes,
JBP, and like they create this thing called we all belong to the Hamas Support Network, HSN. There is no such
News
thing.
to me.
I know. I'm like, did I not pay my dues? Like, how do I not know about this? But there's no such thing, and they've invented it, and no one, like, who's fact checking this stuff? Like, there is no thing. This is not a thing. There is no such thing as a Hamas support network. That's nuts. But
Yeah.
this is being spoken of seriously in the halls of government.
Yeah. What was it on page one that they said the Torah said? It's like what?
Well, and also the Megillah, which is the book we read on Purim, the story of Esther, is not in the Torah. So anybody
Right, though.
Jewish would know that. And so this is like, some like whatever Wikipedia Jew or Wikipedia Jewish studies person like forgot, like actually even it says that on Wikipedia, the book of
Yeah,
Esther is the
I mean,
Torah.
yeah, I mean, I thought most people knew what the Torah was, right? I mean, it's the
Well,
you
most
know,
people don't, but like here, these people are just making stuff up. It's like creative writing at the Enterprise Society. Like they're just, I don't know what kind of drugs they're doing, but they're making this stuff up, and then we all have to deal with it. Like
yeah,
I feel now like I'm going to have to prove that I'm not a member of the Hamas support network.
yeah. For those people who don't know, it's the first five books of your Christian Bible that are the Torah, right?
Right, right, exactly.
The law, something that us lawyers care about, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the reality-based community, as we used to say in the Bush administration, in the bad old days of that administration.
A very small community now, I think.
Yes, well,
Every administration it seems to get worse, and every time there's another one of these laws, people do overcomply, as he mentioned, and that doesn't heal the whole thing. I mean, it doesn't. The government doesn't say, okay, you've done enough. No, then they put another layer that you have to comply with, another. Uh,
The whole argument about appeasement not working really applies in this situation. I mean, that's often trotted out as an excuse to like attack people that haven't attacked us. But in this case, I mean, you're talking about, what is being actually done here that you can see and not like some propaganda about some foreign country. Like you can't constantly concede the power in this country. You're never going to get anywhere. You're just going to keep going backwards. They're going to just take that as a sign to advance again.
what is it we're looking at for the near future, I guess I'd say, for this upcoming year as we go into this new administration? And, what do you see coming up?
For those of us who haven't read the Esther Project or Project 2025 and just have heard bad things about it, what is actually on the horizon?
for us or for them?
Well, whoever needs to be concerned, which I think is just about everybody. I mean, I know that Project 2025 is like a 900-page paper, so it's like I'm not asking you to like, give me all of it right now, right? But related to our discussion, what's the most concerning thing that you know of that we're looking at in the future?
Yeah. I mean, I think what we've been talking about in terms of domestic repression of political movements, I think it seems like, and I'm not a fortune teller. I sometimes can predict people's haircuts, but I think we're going to
That's a very
see.
specialized superpower.
Yeah, and it's not always reliable, so it's really sketchy. But I think we're going to see more increasing state violence against peaceful protests, which is terrifying. Um, I think this administration is Netanyahu was waiting for the election to invade Lebanon. So I think we're going to see an emboldened militarist Israel in the region.
I mean, Biden was waiting for the election to dump another however many billion on Israel, right? All that stuff was very sketchy to do while there was an election going on, and now the election is over. All bets are off.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a difficult period, and I think what we have to do as leftists is we have to, like in immigration circles, there's a lot of talk now about sanctuary, as there was in
Mm-hmm.
2016. We have
Mm-hmm.
to figure out what are the powers we have to protect each other. And, I think like, always organizing the legal work that you do, Gary, and others do, but also like, literally, how do we shelter one another? How do we protect each other? How do we hold each other accountable? I am thinking that the next year is going to be very different than the last year. I think many of our civil liberties are going to be foreclosed. I think we need to be brave and also careful. And I think we really, really need, above all, to think collectively because what regimes do well is make people feel isolated and scared.
They
And so
try
I
to
think
separate
it's,
people.
yeah. And so that you feel like, oh, it's my fault. I shouldn't have done the this or that. But instead, like we have to figure out how to be collaborative. And I have to say, like, sometimes the left can do that, and other times we do get out the circular firing squad. And like we
Yeah.
absolutely have to figure out a way to love and support and tolerate each other.
Yeah, yeah. The excessive sectarianism and it just needs to be set aside. I mean, I think some people have really been very good at, not purity testing and going out and reaching out to people that may feel a little bit are sketchy, but we can ally with anyone, right? We don't necessarily have to trust everybody. We should find people we can trust,
Mhm.
but we don't need to be in a really firm, trusting community with someone to like work with them, right? We need to be able to work with whoever we can work with, and we need to figure out what we're doing because I think a lot of this is like common sense, and it's all written down, and there are books on how to organize and how to operate and how to do this stuff, and I think a lot of that skill and a lot of that knowledge has just sort of been, you know, left to atrophy for a long time. And it's nice to see there's at least some groups out there that are like teaching these skills again, and we just need a lot more of that, I think.
Yeah, sanctuary, mutual aid, kindness, tolerance. And like, I'm not a big one for like trying to talk to the other side, but I do think there are people who maybe don't have the same education as others, and like it's going to be really important. I was just in a meeting about immigration stuff. Like, there's a reason that many people who aren't that politicized around immigration, that it might be bad for them to have their neighbors deported in the middle of the night, but it's on us to explain that in ways that are accessible and make sense to them. It really is. And we can be all annoyed that people don't get it, that we're miseducated in this country, that, ideology victimizes our fellow citizens, all that, but it's our job to say it's terrifying to see that family be terrorized. It's bad for us. It's on us to make those translations because if you understand it, you can make the case. And so I think we have to be really
Yeah.
um, democratic, small d, and humble and engaged with
Yeah.
people. Like, for example, my next door neighbor, who's a lovely older woman, older even than me, uh, during the encampment, she said, well, I live really close to campus. She said, well, I walked up to campus and to see if these people were violent and if they were righteous, and they weren't violent and they were righteous. And so I decided it was okay. So that's an unusual person. Like, she was like, I educate myself about this. I've heard a lot of stupid things and I'm going to see what's true. And then she was very supportive of them. But absent that, it would have been my job to say, and I did to some neighbors, like, those are pretty nice kids. You might want to check it out. Like that is kind of our job,
Hmm.
to be a little patient and to figure out a way to talk to folks.
You need to know people and know where they're at and know how to talk to them. I mean, you
Yeah.
just need to, and you need to have broader circles with more people that you can talk to, and you can't be too isolated. I mean, that's a whole. It's all about community, I think, at this point. And and hey, we're talking on a community radio station, so that's actually a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. What station is this again?
It's
WXRW River West Radio.
River West Radio. And what was the call
that's the
number
station
again?
identification, WXRW 104.1 FM, Milwaukee.
Okay. Well, it's been great talking to you. I actually have to go, but thank you so much.
No, no, this has been great. Yes, I love talking to you, and maybe we'll do it again sometime. That sounds
That'll
great.
be great. And meanwhile, I'll see you around the struggle.
Yes, yes.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye bye.
Bye.